fight prediction video for UFC Vegas 62 or UFC Fight Night 212. I'm gonna be honest with y'all, there has some decent fights on here. This is enough to hold us until UFC 280. This card is next week. UFC 280 is a week from then, so UFC 280 is 2 weeks away. But not the worst card. You got fighters in here who are finishers, so there'll be some exciting fights on this card, but this is just an appetizer. UFC 280, that's what everybody's talking about. Hope everybody's doing well. Yeah, please like and subscribe to this video and let's get to it. Okay, we got Mike Jackson versus Pete Rodriguez. I'm gonna be honest with y'all, I didn't know Mike Jackson was still in the UFC, but I'm gonna tell you this, I assure you, after this fight he will not be in the UFC no more. I'm not too impressed with Mike Jackson at all. Mike Jackson, he's known for that one fight versus Phil Brooks. His name is CM Punk. But Mike Jackson, first fight in the UFC, he fought against Mickey Gall. The fight was kind of odd the way it happened. And then CM Punk was going to fight the winner out of this fight, Mike Jackson versus Mickey Gall. But then Mickey Gall not really known for his knockout power. But Mickey was able to land 1-2 and drop him with the right hand. And he just took his back and the choke wasn't all the way in. And he was able to submit Mike in like less than a minute. But then Mike Jackson had other fights, like when Mike Jackson fought against Phil Brooks, which is CM Punk. This was another fight which was odd because it looked like Mike Jackson lost the first round. It looked like CM Punk won the first round, like he was able to edge him with the takedown at the end of the first round. But then the second and third round, Mike was able to hurt CM Punk with almost everything he threw. Each punch Mike landed, he hurt CM Punk. But it was so odd because he didn't really finish CM Punk when he could have numerous times. It almost looked like he was trying to win a decision over CM Punk, but he was hurting him. He was hurting him on the feet. He was hurting him on the ground. He was dropping bombs from on top of CM Punk, from CM Punk's full guard, but was hurting CM Punk, but never turned up to look for a finish, which was odd. After that, he fought against Dean Barry, and Dean is the 5-time kickboxing champion, and he was a big favorite. When they fought, Dean was missing a lot of punches. Like the first half of the first round, Dean was missing a lot of his haymakers, but then he started to land more shots in the second half of the first round, and he hurt Mike Jackson a couple times, but when he knocked him down, he poked him in the eye. And it was odd because he had kicked him in the groin a couple times before that. Mike won this fight in the UFC, but he was losing the fight. He lost the first round. You could argue if this fight would have went to the second round, he would have lost that first round to Dean Barry 10-8. But Mike Jackson is 1-1. 1 win, 1 loss, 1 no contest. And that was nothing after he beat Phil Brooks, CM Punk. He tested positive for marijuana. The fight got changed from a win for Mike Jackson to a no contest. So he's 1-1. Like, he's tall, he's 6'2", especially for welterweight, but I'm not seeing no offense from Mike Jackson. I'm seeing good movement, head movement, but I'm not seeing him pull the trigger. And his only win, he beat CM Punk by decision, but he never really pulled the trigger against CM Punk. And he beat Dean Barry, but that was by disqualification. He was losing the fight. I'm not too impressed with Mike Jackson, and I think this is his last fight in the UFC. And then his opponent is Pete Rodriguez. Pete is 4-1 with 4 knockouts, and his only 1 loss comes to Jack Della Maddalena, and that fight was his first fight in the UFC, but he took the fight on short notice. So he took the fight like on a week's notice, and he didn't really do too good at all, to be honest. It wasn't competitive at all. But just like Pete, like, he's 5'9". He's gonna be shorter than a lot of his opponents, but like, he's very powerful. He's 4-1 with 4 knockouts, so all his wins come by knockout. His longest win is 2 minutes and 21 seconds. So he's getting opponents out there in almost less than 2 minutes. But the thing is, he has to get on the inside to land bombs. I can see him struggling against taller, longer, more cerebral strikers. Somebody like Ian Gary will be a nightmare opponent for him. He's powerful. He kind of reminds me of Mike Perry, which Mike Perry won his first couple fights in the UFC. Pete hasn't won 1 fight yet, so it's hard to compare him to Mike Perry. But look at his height, his knockout power. He throws predominantly punches. He kind of reminds me of Mike Perry, but he's very powerful, especially in his right hand. This is a weird fight. I don't want to see Mike Jackson in the UFC no more, to be honest, unless he starts to let his hands go a little bit more. But then again, I don't think Pete can really land against Mike, because Mike good at avoiding big shots, and he's tall and he's long. So this fight, unless Pete take more of a chance, which he probably can, because he doesn't have to worry about Mike Jackson's hands, because Mike doesn't really throw a lot, to be honest. I can see Pete taking more chances than Mike Jackson, and I can see him getting the knockout, because I know Mike is tough and he's durable. But if you look at Mike Jackson's record, he's 1-1-1. He got hurt against Mickey Gall. He got knocked down and got submitted. He got hurt against Dean Barry, but then he ended up winning by oppo. The only person who didn't hurt him was CM Punk. So he's been hurt in all his fights almost. So I'm going to go with Pete Rodriguez by first round knockout. We got Tatsuro Taira versus CJ Vergara. Tatsuro, he's only 22, but he's 11-0. Very dangerous. He has power in his hands. He has great submissions. He's long for the division. When I first saw he was from Japan, I was a little worried because beating the competition in Japan is not as tough as beating the competition in America and in the UFC. But then I looked at his highlights and I was in love with his style, his movement, his angles. Like, he's real fluid. And one thing I like is that, like, if his opponent make one mistake, he can finish them. Another thing I like about Tatsuro is he's also good at controlling his opponent, even if he don't necessarily get the finish. His opponent is CJ Vergara. CJ real aggressive, real powerful. He's 10-3, 6 wins by knockout, 4 by decision. He's also real tough, never been knocked out. Yeah, but he was on the 5-fight win streak up until he fought O'Day Osborne. The thing is with CJ, he's very powerful and aggressive, but he has to get on the inside to land his strikes. He has powerful hooks, and like he showed it against Bruno Mesquita, he was able to land a knee to Bruno's body and finish him. He throws a lot of strikes. He throws a lot of knees, a lot of hooks. He even have finishes with spinning back kicks. He even landed a spinning back kick against a guy, and CJ was able to go and land a flying knee while the guy was leaning against the cage. But CJ, he always goes for it. I'm leaning towards Tatsuro on this one, but I wouldn't be surprised if CJ win, because sometimes if a fighter is aggressive, I'm not saying he has a lack of skills, but an aggressive fighter can make up for lack of skills. When CJ fought against O'Day was just taller, longer, and just kept him at bay. And that's the thing, CJ, he can only land his devastating strikes from the inside. And the thing is, Tatsuro is going to be hard to hit because Tatsuro is taller and he's longer than CJ too. But the thing is, if I see any fighter making a mistake, I see more so CJ Vergara making a mistake. But I don't think Tatsuro can submit him. But CJ been submitted before though. He got submitted by Devin Miller in 2018. But more than likely, this fight is going to be on the feet. The wrestling is going to cancel out. I think Tatsuro is going to maintain his game plan and impose his will. So for this one, I'm going to go with Tatsuro by 3-round decision. Okay, we got Piera Rodriguez versus Sam Hughes. This one is in the strawweight division. We have Piera. She's 8-0, 5 wins by knockout, 3 wins by decision. Yeah, but she has a lot of knockouts for the strawweight division. One thing I noticed when watching her fight against Kate Hansen and her fight against Valeska on the Contender Series is she's real good at mixing up her striking with her wrestling. And like when she goes for takedowns, her opponent never sees it coming. But one thing that stands out with her is her hands. She has a lot of power in her hands and she throws real good combinations. But the thing is, she did beat Kate Hansen, and Kate Hansen is 7-6, and she's on a little slump now. She's lost 3 fights in a row. So I would love to see Piera versus more of an elite fighter in the UFC's strawweight division. But then she has to beat Sam Hughes first in order to get there. And Sam Hughes is 7-4, 2 wins by knockout, 3 by submission, 2 by decision. She's kind of a mixed bag, kind of inconsistent. She's on a 2-fight win streak now, but she's had some lackluster performances in the past. But one thing I'm starting to learn from Sam Hughes is she's starting to attempt more takedowns in her fights. Because I noticed even when she fought against Loma last year, Loma took her down 4 times, and then after that she fought against Luana Pinheiro, and Pinheiro took her down twice. When she fought against, in her last fight, Elisa Reed, she was able to take Elisa down 4 times. And she actually was able to finish her from strikes. She was able to get in full mount in the 3rd round and just finish her with brutal elbows. But I think we're seeing more of a refined version of Sam Hughes, more well-rounded. Striking never been bad. Skill, her technique never been bad. It's just she had to just mix things up better. I don't know about this fight, to be honest. I like both girls. And it's tough to say what fighters would do. But a lot of fighters, until you beat the next caliber or next level of opponent, it's kind of hard to say how good you really are. So Piera has to get past Sam Hughes in order for her to separate herself from other women in the strawweight division. And do I think she would get past Sam Hughes? More than likely. But this prediction, I'm going to have to go with, even though she only has 1 fight in the UFC, I'm going to have to go with Piera Rodriguez by decision. We have Raphael Assuncao versus Victor Henry. Yeah, Raphael, he's on a rough patch right now. He's lost 4 fights in a row, 2 of those by stoppage. And it's weird because prior to that, he was on a 4-fight win streak. And it's weird because I thought he beat TJ in the second fight. In his second fight against TJ, he lost, but I think he did more to win the fight. So it's funny because if he wins that fight, that's 12 fights in a row for him. The only thing is he has way too many split decision wins because he already had 1 split over TJ. And then he had a split over the champion Aljamain Sterling and a split over Marlon Moraes. But the thing is, yes, Raphael, he's getting older. He's 40. He's on a 4-fight losing streak. But look who he's lost to. He lost to Ricky Simmons, Cody Garbrandt, Corey Sandhagen, and a prime Marlon Moraes. I think Raphael Assuncao has a higher chance of winning this fight than what people think. Because sometimes people look at fighters' records and look at their losses and just assume that they're bad fighters. Even just like a guy like Tony Ferguson. Yeah, he's lost several fights in a row, but look who he lost to. He lost to guys who are former champions or former title challengers. Yeah, but Raphael, he's known for being more so one of the more well-rounded fighters in the UFC. Great everywhere, great on the ground, great wrestling, great striking. But the thing is with Raphael Assuncao, and I think this might be catching up to him, sometimes he don't really have the best offense. Sometimes he don't pull the trigger like he's supposed to. And sometimes he's just content with just throwing leg kicks and just moving around and just doing just a little bit more than his opponent. I think some of his opponents don't really respect his offense like that because they don't have nothing to fear and be worried about. Well, they have something to be worried about, but he's not fighting like Cody Garbrandt, who's going to be throwing bombs. Raphael is one of the more safer fighting guys in the UFC. At times, he really don't take a lot of chances at all. But his opponent is Victor Henry. Victor, his last fight, he put on a striking display against Leone Barcelos. And Victor Henry, his output was crazy. He landed 181 strikes and he threw 352 total strikes. So this guy is cut from a different cloth. His last fight against Leone Barcelos, they were going back and forth, but then out of nowhere, it looked like Victor Henry would just get like a temporary power up or something, and he'd just be, for like 10 seconds, he'd just be throwing a crazy amount of strikes. So it's almost like Victor Henry is like a video game fighter. But the thing is with Leone, I don't think Leone Barcelos took Victor Henry serious because this was Victor Henry's first fight in the UFC. Another thing that kind of scares me from Victor Henry, let's look at his strikes landed per minute. It's 12. That's crazy, right? But look at his strikes absorbed per minute. It's 893. So he absorbs 8.93 strikes per minute too, which I don't think nobody cares about that because he lands so many strikes per minute. Another thing about Victor Henry is his knockout power is questionable. He popped Leone Barcelos, but he never really hurt him. It was never a point in the fight where Leone looked like he was out on his feet. So I mean, honestly, I don't think Raphael can beat Victor Henry. But just looking past Raphael Assuncao, in the future, if he's fighting against a Song Yadong, you know, you don't want to take too many shots from an elite bantamweight who can knock you out of nowhere. Yeah, but this fight, the more I look into it and think about it, the less I think Raphael has a chance. Which the only thing he got going for him is the fighters who he lost to. These guys were all at one point in the top 10 of the UFC's bantamweight division. Another thing is with Victor Henry, this is only his second fight in the UFC. Some fighters, they have their first good fight in the UFC, but then after that, they kind of fall off. Because we see guys like Edmund Shabazian and guys, they have their first impressive win, and then after that, it's almost like they're a different person. Or either they get to top 15, top 10, and they just don't look the same. Yeah, but this prediction is just Victor Henry's output. His volume is crazy. I don't even want to see Victor versus Raphael. I want to see Victor versus like a Saeed Nurmagomedov or like a fighter inside the top 15. And I really want to see Victor test because Raphael don't have the volume. They're like opposites. And I think Victor may actually get the finish. He may actually finish Raphael. But my prediction is I'm going to go with Victor winning a 3-round decision. We have Nick Maximov versus Jacob Malkoun. I'm gonna be honest with y'all, both these guys are skillful, both these guys are technical, but if you only want to see a striking match, then do not watch this fight because these are two grapplers and these are two guys who, they're hard to knock out, they're hard to submit. I know Nick Maximov was submitting his last fight, but I think he made a mistake. I think he should have kept the fight standing up, but that's the thing with Nick, his stand-up is not dangerous at all, to be honest. Like, his stand-up is not bad, it's decent, basic. I'm not seeing him putting nobody away with strikes, at least not in the UFC. And then when he fought against Puna Soriano, it almost looked like he lost that fight. He wanted nothing to do with the striking. I know Soriano's one of the more dangerous guys in the middleweight division, but Nick wanted nothing to do with Soriano's striking. Nick was undefeated prior to his last fight against Andrade Andre Petrosky, but his opponent is Jacob Malkoun. Yeah, Jacob is just a wrestler. He can ground the pound something out if he wanted to, but he's more of bat people up against the cage, take him down, or hold him against the cage and just control him. He's more of a position over submission type guy. It's not like you can say about Jacob Malkoun. Yeah, he's tough, he has a lot of heart, and he's skillful too. I'm not too impressed with his striking either. His striking, in my opinion, is better than Nick's, but Jacob's kind of slow, especially with his right hand. You can see it coming from a mile away. I don't think he's gonna land it against Nick, but that's the thing with Nick. Nick constantly, he grapples everybody. Nick Maximov initiated the grappling with Andre, and that was the beginning of the end for him. I think that's what Nick does. His go-to is take his opponent down and submit them fast or just control them. I think this is gonna be a boring fight. I get an edge to Nick on the ground, but then again, Nick can even submit Soriano, and Nick hasn't submitted nobody in the UFC. So hopefully the grappling cancel out and we see a striking match. That's what I would like to see. And hopefully Nick learned from his last fight to not just be going for takedowns recklessly. He has to show improved striking, or he has to show that he has improved striking, because we're not seeing none of Nick striking at all. So we don't really know if it's improved or not. I think Nick is the better fighter, more athletic, faster, but I think Jacob has a better striking. I think their ground game is going to cancel out. If I had to make a prediction, I would go with Jacob by decision. The one for y'all, we got Leomana Martinez, and he's fighting against Brandon Davis. Yeah, this is an easy one. I watched both of their highlights, both of their footage, and I like both guys. I know Leomana, he's only had 2 fights in the UFC, but this kid is real dangerous. He's real powerful. He's 9-3, 8 wins by knockout, 0 by submission, and 1 by decision. And what's interesting about Leomana is, if you look at his amateur record, he had 3 submissions by armbar. So it's very interesting. He won his first amateur fight in 12 seconds, which is crazy. And then after that, he won by armbar in 30 seconds. So that's real impressive. So he won 1 fight by knockout, and then he won 3 in a row by armbar. And then he won his next one by TKO. And it's real interesting because ever since then, he's been knocking people out. He doesn't have a submission on his professional record, but he has submissions in his arsenal. And he showed it against Ronnie Lawrence. Yes, he lost the fight against Ronnie. All Ronnie did was just take him down constantly. Yeah, Ronnie took him down 6 times and controlled him for over 8 minutes. He was knocked down multiple times, especially in the first and third round. He was knocked down once in the first round, and he was knocked down twice in the second round. So he showed he has an iron chin. He was able to hurt Ronnie in the third round twice. So he knocked Ronnie down twice in the third round, and Ronnie took him down, but he actually attempted an armbar, which Mana, he has submissions as an amateur. He just doesn't need them as a professional because he knocks most of his opponents out. His opponent he's fighting is Brandon Davis. Brandon is the veteran, long UFC veteran, Killer B, 14-9. This is his second stint in the UFC. He was in the UFC previously. Back in 2019, he lost a close fight to Giga. But one thing I didn't really like about Brandon Davis is he only has 1 win in the UFC. So he lost 4 times, all right? And that's not the worst thing, just looking at who he lost to. Vergara, Storm is 12-4. He lost to Giga, Zabit. He actually lost 5 fights in the UFC. They don't have Enrique fight on UFCstats.com, but he lost 5 fights in the UFC. And the thing is with Brandon Davis, he's good everywhere. He's solid, well-rounded. He could do it all. It's almost like he's missing the juice that like some of these other guys have in the bantamweight division. I mean, he's 1-5 in the UFC. His record speaks for itself, but it seems like he's not hurting his opponent as much as other bantamweights would if they landed the same strikes. He was durable up until his last fight. That was his first time ever been knocked out, but that's the thing, like his biggest attribute is his toughness, and that's not good enough in the UFC's bantamweight division. I'm not too impressed with Brandon Davis. Before his last fight, he was on a 4-fight win streak, but those are fights outside the UFC. And it's interesting because it almost asks the question of, is he good enough to be in the UFC? Because he's 1-5 and he's destroying people outside the UFC, but then when he fights in the UFC, he's losing. So he has 5 losses in the UFC. That means his record, if he wasn't in the UFC, that means he have a record of 14-4. But the thing is, the only win he has on his record is against Randy Costa, and Randy has lost 3 fights in a row. But that's not the most impressive accomplishment. But this is an easy one. I'm going to go with Leomana Martinez by first round knockout. We have Misha Cirkunov versus Alonzo Menifield. And the crazy thing is about this fight, they both fight fight a little similar. It's just Misha has more submissions. But in my opinion, whichever fighter get this fight to the ground first will win this fight, because they both have brutal ground and pound. The only difference is Misha has more ways to win on the ground. Alonzo only can TKO Misha on the ground, but Misha can ground and pound Alonzo or submit him. The only thing is, if you're going to look at the stats, Alonzo Menifield takedown defense is 83%. So I don't know if Misha can get the fight to the ground, because on the feet, I don't think Misha has a chance against Alonzo, because on the feet, Misha's best weapon is his left head kick, but he don't really throw it as often as he should. But Misha's hands is not the best. Sometimes when Misha throw punches, it look like it's some of the worst technique in the UFC. Sometimes he throws flurry of punches with his chin up. It just look like he don't even train his boxing at all. But Alonzo, his hands are better. His hands are more refined, and he has like devastating power in his right hand. The thing is with Alonzo, he hasn't knocked nobody out on the feet in a long time, because his last fight was against Askar and he took him down and ground and pounded him. And then the win before that was against Paul Craig, and Paul Craig was on his back and Alonzo threw punches from standing up and was able to finish Paul Craig from the ground while Paul was on his back. It's been a long time since Alonzo knocked somebody out on the feet. It looked like Alonzo, when he gets to a certain level of competition, he doesn't win. Like when he fought Devin Clark, he lost that. He just got outpointed against Devin Clark. He fought Ovence, he got knocked out by Ovence. He fought William Knight. I honestly think he might have won. I'm a big William Knight fan, but I think Alonzo probably won that fight. But it was extremely close. But the toughest person who Alonzo beat was Paul Craig. And at best, Paul Craig is like barely a top 10 fighter in the light heavyweight division. So it seems like whenever Alonzo gets to a certain level of competition, he loses. But Misha's not the most consistent guy either. He got submitted in his last fight. And then prior to that, he fought Krzysztof Jotko. And to me, it looked like he won that fight. He was able to take Krzysztof down multiple times, and it looked like the significant strikes were similar. Yeah, they both landed 41 significant strikes, but Misha had 5 takedowns. I don't know how he lost that fight, but he lost that fight. He lost to Ryan Spann. He got destroyed by Ryan Spann. But prior to that, he beat Jimmy Crute of all people. So this is the thing, like he's not the most consistent guy, Misha. He has the experience fighting the higher competition opponents. Yes, Alonzo is very talented. We all know he's very talented, but he hasn't really proved that he's a top 5 fighter yet. He hasn't proved he's a top 10 fighter in the UFC's light heavyweight division. I would almost put Alonzo on the same level as Ian Cutelaba as of right now. And Misha beat him, and he beat Nikita Krylov, and he beat Patrick Cummins, and he beat Jimmy Crute. In my opinion, he beat Krzysztof Jotko. So I don't think Alonzo fought the same competition as Misha. And when he did, he got starched. But at the same time, I don't think Misha has the style to beat Alonzo, because Alonzo is extremely hard to take down, and his wrestling is only getting better. Alonzo might take Misha down and ground and pound him. But my prediction for this fight, both of these guys are inconsistent, but it looks like Alonzo might be more consistent, even though he hasn't fought the same level of competition as Misha Cirkunov. I think he's more consistent. I think he's a better fighter, and I don't think Misha has a style to beat him, which he's still dangerous. He could finish anybody, but I think Alonzo is going to put together a game plan, stuff to takedowns, and win on the feet. I'm picking Alonzo Menifield to win a 3-round decision.
You got Joanderson, Brito versus AJ Cunningham. This is a weird one because you have a Joanderson Brito. He's been in the UFC for under a year, and AJ Cunningham is making his UFC debut. It's always a risk in betting on fighters who hasn't fought in the UFC yet, because regardless of how they look outside the UFC, sometimes they come to the UFC and they get destroyed, and they sometimes can't get one win in the UFC. But Joanderson Brito, 13-3, 6 wins by knockout, 5 by submission, 2 by decision. He has 8 first-round finishes. He can get the job done by knockout. He can get the job done by submission. The thing is with Joanderson is pretty predictable. The way he fights, he walks forward, he applies pressure, and he throws combinations of punches, and he's looking to land one of those punches because he knows it just takes one from him. Even though he has a lot of knockout power, he's not the most accurate guy. So he might throw like 3 or 4 punches. He might miss all of them, which he showed against Andre Philly. It just take one. If one land, then that's all it takes. But against Andre Philly, he was more calculated than he has been in the past. But against Bill Algeo, like, he was more predictable and less accurate. A lot of times Joanderson misses, and he misses bad. And what he does is Joanderson, he's well-rounded, right? But if he can't get the quick knockout, he'll look to take his opponent down and get the quick submission. He has a lot of submissions in his arsenal. But the thing is with his wrestling, he showed against Bill Algeo that his wrestling only works on a certain level. Yes, yes, he took him down twice. That's still good. 2 takedowns against Bill, but I don't think his wrestling will work against anybody in the top 10 in the featherweight division. But his opponent is AJ Cunningham. AJ is 9-2, 3 wins by knockout, 3 by submission, 3 by decision. One thing that stands out with AJ is this dude is super tough. I've seen a couple of fights where he was just getting hammered and he came back and won, whether by knockout or by submission. But the thing is with AJ, his striking is not the best. Like, his movement is good. He moves well. It's just he throws a lot of unpredictable strikes. He had one win when he dropped the guy down with the spinning elbow. Like, the guy hurt him. The guy hurt him on the feet, right? But then he dropped him with a spinning elbow, and then he was able to pounce on him and get submission. He had a couple of fights like that where his striking didn't look the best. Well, his striking is not bad, but that's probably the worst part of his game. But he's constantly improving. Yeah, but he had another win where he knocked the guy out with the head kick. And that's the thing with AJ. I've seen some of his fights where, like, he throws the head kick a lot, and it seems like he needs space in order to throw his strikes. And I don't think Joanderson is going to give him that space. But the difference is Joanderson is more predictable. You know what he's going to do. He's going to throw punches and bunches, and he's going to look to land at least once. And if that don't work, he's going to try to get his opponent down and take him down and submit them. But AJ's never been submitted, so that game plan might not work. But in AJ, he's unpredictable with his strikes, but he needs separation, and Joanderson is not going to let him get that separation. It's hard for me to bet on fighters making their UFC debut. And AJ, he's tough, but I want to see improved striking. I want to see him get hit less, because he does get hit pretty often in some of his fights. But if Joanderson can get close to him, I think Joanderson can win, maybe by knockout. My prediction is Joanderson winning by first round knockout. Next fight, Jordan Wright versus Dusko Todorovic. These are 2 guys who are not the most consistent guys in the middleweight division. You have Jordan Wright, who's a karate style fighter who has excellent movement, great kicks. He has real good killer instinct. It seems that the glaring weakness he has in his game is he doesn't like it when his opponent pressures him. So that seems like the way to beat Jordan Wright. It seems like there is some susceptibility on the ground, because when he was fighting Marc Andre was putting pressure on Jordan Wright, like we've seen other opponents do to Jordan Wright with success. But then Jordan went to try to attempt to take Marc down, and he ended up getting guillotined. He's not comfortable when his opponent is applying pressure and engaging. So certain fighters are nightmare opponents for Jordan Wright, and those opponents are fighters who are brawlers, like Marc Andre, Joaquin Buckley, Bruno Silva. They're all brawlers. They're technical brawlers, but they're brawlers. And that's the thing, like a lot of these karate style fighters, a lot of them feel comfortable on the outside where they can engage whenever they want to, and they can control the tempo and the pace. I think that's his style that kind of works against him. But he's not a bad fighter though. Like, he has killer instinct. We've seen him put fighters away. Even when he fought against Bruno Silva, he was landing kicks on Bruno Silva and actually had Bruno in the Muay Thai clinch and was landing knees. It's just he got kind of over aggressive and got countered and got finished. In that fight against Bruno Silva, he showed he had killer instinct and showed that he's going to go for the finish. His opponent is Dusko Todorovic. Dusko is a mixed bag. You never know what you get from Dusko. Like, he has excellent movement too. He has real good head movement. But the problem with Dusko is, if you go look at his fights, a lot of times he wins from taking his opponent down and ground and pounding them. He showed it against Maki Patolo. The thing is with Dusko, I'm not too impressed with his offensive striking. He throws kicks and punches from time to time, but it seems like he's okay just moving around, avoiding big shots. And if he can't get the takedown, he doesn't do a lot of anything except just continue moving around and moving his head. So I'm not seeing like a lot of offensive striking from Dusko. And he showed it against Punahele Soriano. Soriano, he has great takedown defense, and he's a wrestler himself. So Dusko really didn't have that style. I think that was a bad matchup for Dusko, because Dusko can't take him down. But then again, Dusko didn't really throw nothing. He just got hammered. He got knocked down multiple times by Soriano, and he had no answer for Soriano's left hand. When he fought against Chidi Njukwani, he took Chidi down early on in the first round, but then as soon as Chidi was able to get back up, Dusko had no answers, because whenever he can take his opponent down, he tends to not do anything but just move around. I would like to see Dusko actually engage more on offense, but this fight is going to come down to how good Jordan Wright's takedown defense really is, because if Jordan can keep the fight standing up, I think he has a better chance of winning
winning this fight because Dusko is not a brawler. He don't have the style to overwhelm Jordan Wright. So if Dusko go in recklessly against Jordan Wright, he might get finished from ground and pound. And that's my prediction. I'm predicting Jordan Wright to win this fight by first round TKO from ground and pound. I can't see Dusko taking down Jordan Wright, and Dusko doesn't have a lot of offense for me to trust that he can win the UFC fight against a decent fighter. Okay, we got another one for y'all, an easy one. We got Askarov versus Brandon Royval. Yeah, this is a no-brainer. Askarov was undefeated up until he fought Kakar France, which a lot of people thought he won the fight. Yeah, they robbed him against Kakar, and Kakar ended up winning this fight against Askarov and losing his next fight against Brandon Moreno. So yeah, that's what happens when you win the fight. You're not supposed to win. There's no secret what he's trying to do. He's trying to take his opponent down and control him and ground and pound him. If there's opportunities for a finish, he has plenty of submissions and he has real brutal ground and pound. We haven't seen that ground and pound in the UFC because all his wins come by decision, which I was just looking at the stats and it says his average time in the UFC is 15 minutes. So that's real interesting to see that he averaged 15 minutes in the UFC, which to me it looks like he's a real good fighter. He's a great fighter because he can stick to his game plan for 15 minutes and control his opponent for that duration. Yeah, but his striking is basic. He typically throws 1-2 and like he's more comfortable fighting on the inside. I'm not gonna say more of a brawler, but he's more of like a dirty boxer type of striker on the inside, but he's comfortable and safe there because he has the wrestling to fall back on, and that typically works because his opponents have to be worried about his takedowns. And the thing is, if you look at his record, he's beat the who's who. He's beat all of the elite guys in the flyweight division. It looks like the only person he didn't beat in the flyweight division is the current champion, Davison Figueiredo, but he has wins over Joseph Benavidez, Alexandra Pantoja, Tim Elliott. Like he has a win over some of the most elite guys in the division, and to me he has a win over Kakara too, even though technically it's a loss, but most people thought he won the fight. But his opponent is Brandon Royval. Royval is known for being a wild striker. Like he throws a lot of unexpected and unpredictable strikes, like knee, spinning elbow, spinning back fists. He showed it when he fought against Kakar France. They were both hurting each other, but Kakar would drop him and then Kakar would go in and he'd get dropped with spinning back fists. It was just back and forth, but eventually he ended up submitting Kakar in the second round with a guillotine, and Kakar had that fight won. He dropped the ball on that one. But it looked like the people who beat Brandon Royval, Brandon Moreno, and Alexandria Pantoja, Askar beat them. Askar drawed with Brandon Moreno, but he was able to beat Alexandra. But one thing that scares me with Brandon Royval is his jiu-jitsu. Out of his 14 wins, he has 9 submissions, and a lot of his submissions come off his back. He has a lot of arm bars and a lot of triangle chokes. So that's one thing Askar has to be worried about. But in my opinion, that's the only thing. So as long as Askar is able to control him safely without getting submitted, I think he'll be all right. But this is an easy prediction. I'm going to go with Askar winning an easy 3-round decision.
You got the veteran Cub Swanson versus Jonathan Martinez, but Jonathan Martinez is a veteran too. He's been in the UFC for quite some time. He's been in the UFC since 2018, so it's 4 years. But we know what Cub is trying to do, honestly. There's no secret Cub trying to get the knockout. The only thing is with Cub Swanson, he has a history of injuries, especially like in his hands. So he had like a lot of surgeries in the past on his hands. There's always question about his health, and a lot of times he fights injured too. So he has a history of actually fighting while injured. But he's just a boxer. That's what Cub Swanson is. He's great boxing, great hands, great head movement, great movement. And what he's really known for is being prone to being submitted and out-grappled, because a lot of his losses came by opponents who were able to take him down and submit him or just out-grapple him, which his grappling is good. It's just that's the only hole he really has in his game. But his last fight was against Darren Elkins, and I don't think Cub Swanson put his hands up for 1 second in the fight. His hands was down the whole time. It looked like Darren only landed 1 punch, which was the overhand right. And that's another thing that scares me with Cub Swanson, because him fighting with his hands down can be very scary depending on his opponent. He don't really respect a lot of his opponent's striking, because 9 times out of 10 his striking is better. But he did get caught the overhand right from Darren Elkins. It looked like that was the only punch Darren Elkins landed. But he was able to throw punches from all kind of angles against Darren, hurt him multiple times, knocked him down. And then when Darren got back up, he was able to land a spinning back kick that floored Darren Elkins again, and the referee stopped the fight. That was real impressive to finish Darren Elkins, because Darren is a real tough fighter. He was finished real fast against Giga prior to Darren Elkins. But that's the thing, like I said, Cub don't really respect a lot of his opponent's striking. And whenever you throw him in there against another striker who's not scared of him, he could be a little susceptible to getting outstruck, because it's not that he's a bad striker, he just don't respect a lot of his opponent's striking, especially like a Giga. Like, you can't put your hands down against Giga. You got to respect Giga at all times. But his opponent is Jonathan Martinez. Jonathan, 16-4. Like I said, been in the UFC since 2018. He's a veteran. Jonathan Martinez kind of fights a little bit like Anthony Pettis, a little bit. He started fighting in Taekwondo when he was 15 years old, and that's his style. His style is to throw kicks. Just like Swanson throw punches from weird angles. That's what Jonathan Martinez does. He has a real good one too, but a lot of his strikes are just lead head kick, lead body kick. He's really throwing kicks, throwing his opponent off rhythm. And that's the thing, like, will Swanson respect Jonathan striking? Which I don't think he'll respect his striking. I think he respect his kicks though. But that's the thing, if Cub can get on the inside and make it a boxing match, I think he will obliterate Jonathan Martinez, because we've seen Jonathan Martinez knocked out before against Davey Grant, and Davey was able to apply pressure. Even though he did get knocked down the first round, Davey got knocked down the first round against Jonathan Martinez, so there's always danger in fighting Jonathan. But in the second round, Davey was able to apply pressure and catch his rhythm, and then he did a right body shot, left hook over the top, and it actually floored Jonathan Martinez. But if Cub can make it that type of boxing match, the same that Davey Grant did, he'll have success. But the same thing, if he don't respect Jonathan Martinez, he could get his head knocked off. I'm predicting this to be an exciting striking match. If I had to make a prediction, I'm going to go with Cub Swanson. I think the way to beat Cub Swanson typically is to take him down and out grapple him. But my prediction is Cub Swanson winning by a second round knockout. Main event of UFC Fight Night 212 or UFC Vegas 62. We have Alexa Grasso versus Viviane Araujo. And to be honest with y'all, this fight card is just a little appetizer before we get to UFC 280. But we can still enjoy this fight card because they got plenty of good fights on here. But nothing like UFC 280. Okay, we have Alexa Grasso. She's on a 3-fight win streak, 14-3. The first thing that stands out with Alexa is she lost to Tatiana and Carla Esparza. Yeah, Tatiana, she's undefeated. She's 8-0. So yeah, she's tearing things apart. And Carla Esparza is the champion right now in the strawweight division. Yeah, but Alexa Grasso, she's very technical, very patient, fast. She has really good hands and she has really good head movement. One thing I noticed about Alexa is a lot of the fights she lost because her opponent took her down. Her takedown defense is only 60%. But if you go and look at some of her fights, even the Macy Barber fight that she won, she got taken down 3 times by Macy and she was controlled for 3 minutes. She got taken down by Carla 4 times, was controlled for 7 minutes. She beat Randa Marcos, but she got taken down for 4 times. It seems like that's the way to beat Alexa Grasso, is to implement takedowns in wrestling. And the fun thing is that type of style is how her opponent Viviane Araujo fights. She's very athletic. She moves well. She has a lot of knockout power, especially in her right hand. But she makes her bread and butter with takedowns. She averages 2.23 takedowns per fight. The only thing is with Viviane Araujo, she don't have the best gas tank. She normally gasses out before the second round is over with. But Viviane, she has to make it a wrestling match. Her takedown defense is 90%. She has a significant advantage on the ground. And on top of that, Viviane, she has 4 submissions. She has way more submissions than Alexa. This fight has title implications because in the women's flyweight division, obviously we know the champion is Valentino Shevchenko, but Viviane is ranked number 6. Alexa is ranked number 5. The winner of this fight could easily fight Tala Santos or Lauren Murphy, and then the winner of that fight might get a title shot. But I'm 50-50 with this fight because it look like their skills kind of cancel out. It look like Alexa has the speed advantage, but she doesn't really have a lot of knockout power. But she has the cardio, but she doesn't have the wrestling. If I had to make a prediction for this fight, I would have to go with a fighter that has the best cardio, and this is a 5-round fight. If this was a 3-round fight, I would choose Viviane Araujo, but I'm gonna have to go with Alexa because I can't see Viviane having cardio past the second round, and this is a 5-round fight. But my prediction for this fight is Alexa winning a 5-round decision. We got some videos we gonna drop for UFC 280, Charles Oliveira versus Islam. We want to thank everybody for y'all support, and feel free to leave a comment whether you agree or disagree with some of the points we made, and always like and subscribe.